everybody, this is Noel. I'm in Atlanta with Diamond Dallas Page. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
We're at my DDP Yoga Performance Center here in Smyrna, Georgia, a lovely little suburb in Atlanta.
Can you introduce yourself
Sure.
and tell our story?
I am, my wrestling name was Diamond Dallas Page, also known as DDP. I didn't start wrestling until I was 35. My career took off at 40, which was in 1996, and blew through the roof, and I had an unbelievable run. My childhood, because this is about dyslexia, I'll sort of work backwards. By the time I was 30, I was reading at about a third grade level, and I never knew about dyslexia. I'd never even heard of it. I didn't know what ADD was, attention deficit disorder. As a kid growing up, having, with a lot of addicts, whether it's alcohol or drugs, what keeps sending them back besides the addiction is the shame, trying to escape it. In my scenario, I couldn't read. So when the teachers would go around asking kids to read, some kids could read really well, other kids not so good, but they could read. When it got to me, it was like I will read, and it just everybody starts laughing, and then you get in your own head, and then do something disruptive that's going to get you thrown out of the class. And I tried it. I didn't know why I couldn't read, but I knew that I could listen. And I also knew how to get out of reading after that. If it was going around the class and it was going to come up to my turn, I'd pull the girl or the guy, would do something to get myself thrown out of class. So that's how I got around that part. And then when someone's reading something, you listen. Mm-hmm. So I was a good communicator, mm-hmm. and I could talk really well. So that sort of forced me, there was no being able to live like a wallflower, and not say anything or not be heard, because, I was also like a class clown. And I cheated. It's the only way I got through. And people wrote papers for me. And because I was an athlete and I was nice to everybody. I was never a bully. If anything, no one bullied anybody around me. And especially when it came to those kids who were helping me. So I was always like a super jock, but I also was friends with a lot of the smart kids, and who weren't athletes. And so I've always had this amazing ability to communicate with people. So I literally scraped through school, by the skin of my teeth, and got a good enough grades to pass. Mm-hmm. And I never really thought about it. I just knew it wasn't good at me. I don't like reading. That became my thing. I don't like it. It's boring. I watch movies, I watch documentaries. And as I started to get into the business world, which was very soon, I was already had my own painting business, and I tried to wrestle when I was 22. It didn't work out for me, but I'd been working in nightclubs, so that became my passion. And if I needed things done, I'd get one of the guys to help. Hey, write this up and put that on the sign, and mm-hmm. and I got people to do things for me. But I would do stuff for them too. It wasn't a one-way street. And at one point in time, my first wife, I was about 34 or 35. I'm 34 or 31. I can't remember the exact age. But I remember that I had already set a goal to read my first book. Mm-hmm. This has got to change. Mm-hmm. And I know when it comes to setting goals, you have to set a goal that's a fantasy goal a real goal, and a daily goal. And I set a goal. I was going to read a book from cover to cover. And I picked this book out. It was about a guy named Lee Iacocca. It was an autobiography, an autobiography. He wrote it. And I like reading about people I've found or watching documentaries. So now I thought, well, I'll read about this guy because he intrigued me. And when I thought about reading a book from cover to cover, I was like, man, that's really daunting for me at the time, a little overwhelming. So I broke it down like I do any goals that I would do physically, whether it's lifting weights or being a basketball player or whatever. I did, and I set a goal for myself that I read one page from that book every day. I could do that. Even I could do that. As long as it took to get through. But I just didn't set the goal. I wrote it everywhere. Read today. And I put it on little Post-its. I put it on those little Post-its so I would have to see it. So I put it on my nightstand, my bedpost, my bathroom, in my kitchen. Put it on my refrigerator in my kitchen, put it in my bathroom, put it on my mirror, put it on my shower door. There was like 20 of them. So I couldn't just not do it unless I wasn't going to be true to myself, because I wasn't doing this for anybody but me. And I wanted to have that goal. And I did it. I finally read that book from cover to cover. It took a year, but I did it. And I kept a lot of knowledge out of it. And then I saw Tony Robbins. He was doing a infomercial back in the 80s. And he had a couple famous athletes on there and some regular people that had these amazing goals. And he had cassettes that I could listen to. And I started to listen to it. I'm not going to read his book. I mean, his book was like 600 pages. And that started to get me more focused on the way I was going to set the goals. And in retrospect, that actually came first. Then I decided I was going to read the book from cover to cover. So that Tony Robbins thing would have been first. Then that happened where I was going to, read a book cover to cover. Then I did that. Then I got with, I haven't thought about this in so long, my first wife. And by this time I was practicing reading out loud. It was brutal, but not as bad as when I was a kid. And I was reading it. Kimberly said, where's the movie at or whatever? What's the movie about? And I started to read it. And she was like, Paige, stop fooling around. I said, I'm not. She goes, read it right. I go, I'm trying. And she said, oh my God, you're dyslexic. I go, what's that? Never heard of it. And she goes, that's why you can't read. How do you see them? And I told her how I saw the words and stuff. She goes, yeah, they change around. She goes, they have people can help. I don't know where to send you or what to do, because no one knew at that time. Like, it was just the beginnings of it. So it was like 30 years ago. And I kept just practicing reading everything, and I'd get a little bit better and a little bit better, but it was still brutal. Like, if you had to read something that I wrote back then, you would be like, what is this? But I knew what it was. It was in my hieroglyphics or whatever. But we were in LA, and a friend of mine who I had met surfing, we just started talking, and I said, I'm dyslexic. He goes, me too. He goes, you have to go to the Eris Learning Center. I go, what's that? He goes, it's a place where they help kids and adults with learning disabilities. And he said, I had an amazing teacher. This was like 5 years ago. I doubt if she's still there. Her name is Rose. She was 80 when she worked with me. I went to the Eris Learning Center. Rose was still there. She was 85. And there's methods and there's exercises that you can do that sharpens your brain, just like you could do exercises for your muscles. And then there's sort of like a muscle memory thing, where if you continue to do it over and over and over and over, your body sort of, it becomes a part of you. Same thing with reading. So she gave me all these exercises, and I would work on them. And she told me, I worked with her for 6 months, and she told me, now you're talking to a kid who never did homework, ever, any. And she said that I took home more homework than anybody she's ever seen. And I wanted to learn. I wanted to figure this out. And a lot of it is repetition is the mother of learning. And they would do a thing where they would take these 4 cards and they had images on them. And they were pretty similar. And then you'd look at them, then you'd flip them over, shift them around, put them in order. And it was like an exercise for your brain.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a lot of other things that they did like that. And then I would take the work home. And every Monday and Thursday, I would go and see her. And I could literally feel things that were starting to change. And my friend Marlon, who was writing this book with me, and he was doing the writing, I was doing the talking about it. And when I would read, it was still bad. But after I went to the Eris Learning Center, within a couple of years, it was so much better. And I just started to talk about it and tell people, because people were afraid to admit that they were dyslexic because it meant you were stupid, but not really. It made me, I think, some of the most influential people of this last 100 years have been dyslexic. Jay Leno, the talk shows, dyslexic. Muhammad Ali, dyslexic. One of the greatest talkers ever, really, both of them. When you can't read, you really depend on your verbal skills. Listen, react. That's really the most I'd learned from it. ADD. ADD, oh God, they have ADD. I think that's awesome. I can do 5 things at one time. Most people can't do one. But again, you have to, if you just let yourself go from one subject to another, to another, to another, and you don't come back there, well then, and you just never really work on it. Like I work on telling the story, like if I'm doing some inspirational speaking, there's a chance I'll go off on a rant. And I might forget where I am. And in my brain, it turns it around and all of a sudden, I've got it. Or if I can't get it, I'll go, all right, I just got to ask you guys, I just went off on such a rant, I don't know where I am. What was I saying before I went on this rant? And if someone, then I'll say something like, you thought that dyslexia and ADD was bullshit, right? Everybody laughs. I go, no, it's real. But I would get them to say, oh, you were at blah, blah, blah. I go, you were listening, perfect. And then I pick right up on it.
Yeah.
So I think it was really, I know it was really hard on me growing up as a kid, but I like to find anything that's negative and turn it into a positive. And people can dwell on the negative and pull themselves down with emotional gravity, or they can let it go and look for the positive. The positive side for me is made me a master communicator.
Yeah.
And as far as a reader, I'm still not a great reader, but I'm a pretty decent reader, and I think most of our country here in the United States, the average reading level is like 6th grade, maybe. It's probably worse now. But I read and write, I write my own stuff, and I'll still collaborate with other writers or people, but I will go, no, that structure doesn't look right. This is how I want to say this. And so, again, repetition. I'll say it over and over and over and over again. Repetition is the mother of learning. The more you do something, the better you get. So now you can ask me your questions. Now you know the story.
What message do you want to share for parents of children with dyslexia?
Well, I think the beginning part is don't be so hard on them. Because kids who are dyslexic, they don't know why. They don't know why they can't read. And sometimes it's hard to talk to your parents, but, they might think you're lazy. Like, people thought I was lazy. I don't have a lazy bone in my body. But when you can't do something, you realize, okay, I don't know the problem. I hate to use the word I can't. If you have a kid who has problems reading, there are places that you can go. There are learning centers, at least in our country. I'm not sure over there, but, because it's so prevalent today, I would think that there is some institution that would help them. Matter of fact, understood.org is the #1 place on the internet for helping kids, help them learn to read, but also help the parents learn to deal with it. So that's understood.org, I think would be the best thing I could tell you.
And what advice do you have for children with dyslexia?
Never give up. It's going to happen. But you have to put the work in. Some kids are born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They have everything. Other kids are very poor. It all depends, what cards were you dealt? Well, then you got to play them. And doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, if you can't read, you can't read yet. And that's the whole operative word in your brain. Everything we do in life is the story we tell ourselves. If we say, I can't read, I'll never be able to read, I can't read, you're right. You won't, and you won't be able to. Until I finally said, I'm done. I'm going to beat this. Mm-hmm. And it's still a struggle every day. Just like for some people who are alcoholics or drug addicts, they might be clean and sober for 3 years. Every day is a challenge. Mm-hmm. And the good thing about being in a spot of being ADD, dyslexic, every day you can work on it. Every day you can do something that's going to make you better at it. And the more you do, the more you learn. The more you learn, the better you get. It's simple as that.
Thank you for your interview and your testimony. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.